Well, let's go back now to the diplomatic crisis in the Gulf. Qatar's been given another 48 hours to meet the demands of its Gulf neighbours or face further sanctions. Let's speak to Ivan Eland, who's a senior fellow and director of the Centre on Peace and Liberty. He joins us now from Washington, D.C. Good to have you with us, Ivan. So we don't know what's in the formal response that the Qatari foreign minister has handed over to Kuwait, but Qatar's been given another 48 hours to comply with demands. Is there any reason to think that its position on this has changed?
Well, from the rhetoric coming out of Qatar, it doesn't seem like that. These sanctions, if they study history, and I'm not sure either party has studied history all that much, sanctions are good at putting pressure on countries in the short term, but in the long term, they can usually figure out ways to cheat and get around them. It usually raises the price of things, but it doesn't necessarily. It can put economic pressure, but it doesn't necessarily achieve the political goals. And the political goals in this case are Qatar lessening its relationship with Iran, getting rid of a Turkish military base, shutting down Al Jazeera, its TV network, and stopping support for various groups in the Middle East, among other. There's 13 demands, which is very extensive, and I doubt if it's going to even have much of an economic effect. They do have a blockade, an air and sea blockade, and that usually is a little bit more effective in stopping trade, but it's sanctions. If you're trying to achieve big things with sanctions, they usually fail. That is political things, and I think.
But how could this escalate then, Ivan? Because Saudi and its allies have said that if it doesn't get the answer it wants, then it's going to impose more sanctions. So how could this escalate?
Well, I mean, they can put more. They could put a tighter blockade. They still have the stuff going out through the port to, and Iran and India are supplying stuff. They also have stuff coming in by air. So they could tighten down the economic sanctions. The other problem that they have with Qatar is it's the most wealthy country per capita in the world. So there's a lot of reserves and there's a lot of money there. And so it's going to take a while before these bite. And over time, they'll bite and then they'll start to wear off again as people find ways of evading them.
There's been calls for other parties to intervene in this, for the US to wade in and try and mediate this, given that Qatar is a key ally in the fight against Daesh. I mean, how worried should the West be by this dispute?
Well, it affects the US. The US, on the one hand, has 10,000 military troops in Qatar at a massive base. And on the other hand, it's an ally with Saudi Arabia. And the president of the United States has seemed to be supporting Saudi Arabia and the coalition that's putting the sanctions on. And on the other hand, the State Department seems to be saying, hey, wait a minute, we have this base there, don't get too carried away. So the American government's policy is incoherent at this point. And so, who knows what will happen. But the U.S. could normally be a broker among the parties, but it's sort of hard to do that when we don't even know what our position is.
And, I mean, what are we expecting over the next couple of days? What, if anything, can Kuwait do to try and reach a solution?
Well, I think they are laudably trying to moderate the conflict. I'm surprised, well, I'm not surprised, but because this has been building over time, but it's really astonishing still that this is, this coalition took these dramatic steps against Qatar, and I think it's very unfortunate. And Kuwait is trying to moderate it, as is Russia. But I just think, it's gone too far for that. I think it's going to have to play out one way or another. And I think it's going to, in the long term, it's going to play out to Qatar's advantage.
Ivan, good to get your thoughts there. Thank you very much indeed for that. Ivan Eland there.